Hello and welcome to Quest 11. You remember in Quest 10 we looked at the Victorian time period. This was 1832 until the 20th century. However, you'll remember there was a slight gap. From 1798 until 1832, we haven't discussed this time period yet. Well, good news, we're going to do it now in the Romantic time period video. What we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at the Romantic time period as opposed to the Restoration time period. Think all the way back to the satire unit when everyone was writing journals and diaries and criticizing society for the first time. That's where we're starting, and then we're moving into this Romantic time period. The first thing you want to keep in mind is that romantic does not mean love, like Romeo and Juliet or Nicholas Sparks' story. It refers to feelings of emotion and power and the sanctity of nature. Let's take a look at some of the differences. One of the first major differences is the view of man and the view of God between the Restoration and between Romanticism. Now, you'll remember during the Restoration we had just gotten out of the Dark Ages and Middle Ages, and there was a strong focus on humans and what humans could do and make, and God was sort of cast out of society, and it was all about the individual and what society could achieve. Well, after so many years of that, people started to miss the old things. They started to miss the spiritual nature of life. They started to miss the idea that there could be something more. And so in the Romantic time period, it became less about the individual human and more about the spiritual life. There became a focus on the poor. There became a focus on rural settings. It was not all about large cities and industry. People started to pay attention to the small things. The same goes for the view of God. It wasn't that God just set the world and walked away. The idea was that God was present in nature, in imagination, and in art. So in the Romantic time period, we have, in a way, a restoration of the pre-Restoration time period. Society works like this quite a bit. I'll come back to that point in a second. Another reason that the two are different are the view of nature and the view of logic and feelings. During the Restoration, we had this idea of quantifying things, measuring in science and numbers in order. But in the Romantic time period, they said, wait a second, we can't take a forest and reduce it to numbers. There's something here beyond just the facts, and let's celebrate that. And going along with this, logic versus feelings, the rationalism movement was key during the Restoration. Everything was factual and scientific, whereas the Romantic period is more about emotions, the heart, imagination, creativity. I think you're starting to get the idea. You can also probably get the connection between the Romantic time period and a romantic novel. Romance doesn't just mean love, it means a focus on emotions. Society tends to go back and forth like this a lot. In America, even in the 80s, it was far more individualistic. Now in our politics, it's far more collective, and it will continue to shift back and forth. One decade, there's a focus on science. The next decade, there's a focus on the lack of science, the unexplained. Now, what did all of this ideological stuff lead to in society? Well, in society during the Restoration, there was all about restraint and tradition and rules and following a set pattern, whereas in the Romantic time period, it became more about the individual and being unique. In the Restoration, it was about satire and structure and following specific rules in poetry, but in Romantic time period, it became about doing whatever you felt right, using symbolism, using the supernatural, bringing all of those elements that had been pushed out of society and bringing them back. Now, this actually led to some great historical changes. For example, the American Revolution. It was all about individuals striking out and rejecting what had come before them. This led to what we know today. I'll let you read the slide on your own. It also led to a revolution in France. The idea that the rules and structure was becoming too suffocating for people and that it was necessary for the public to take over. The French Revolution, however, did not go nearly as well as the American Revolution, but that's not the point here. The point is that it was a period of change. So you can see the Romantic time period, even though it was brief, it was a call back to all of those attributes that we talked about in the Anglo-Saxon time period and the King Arthur time period, and got away from what had been looked at in the Restoration time period. That's a very brief overview. Hopefully it gives you a lens to examine some of this poetry through. Go ahead and continue with the rest of the quest. Let me know if you have any questions. Have a great night.